Is the original Resident Evil worth playing in 2026? Resident Evil, known as Biohazard in Japan, was initially released over 30 years ago on the 22nd of March 1996 for the PS1. Over the years, Resident Evil would be ported to a multitude of platforms, so there's many ways to play it, some of which are modern and more accessible. Therefore, don't worry about dusting off the good old PS1 just to play this one. Also, a plethora of versions of the game exist with features, differences and quirks that set them apart. According to How Long to Beat, the average time to beat the main story is 6.5 hours, with the leisurely average coming in at just shy of 9 hours. As a result, you can consider this to be a short game. However, while Resident Evil isn't a long game, it has tons of replay value, a topic I will expand upon later. Let's now talk about the story. The basic premise is that there's been a series of murders in the Arklay Mountains, and you go on a journey to find out why as either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. The game starts in the iconic Spencer Mansion, and I'll say no more than that. I personally really enjoy the story and the way it's told. Aside from having the typical in-game cutscenes, the intro and endings, that's right, endings, are live-action FMVs, something you don't find in many video games. These FMVs evoke a cheesy, low-budget horror film vibe and are endlessly entertaining. The in-game cutscenes are also enjoyable to watch, thanks to their simplistic nature and the voice acting that is certainly one of a kind. Outside of the cutscenes and live-action FMVs, numerous files and letters can be read which provide lore and complement the narrative. The lore you uncover is unsettling and disturbing, making this game's atmosphere all the creepier. Furthermore, don't forget that I mentioned endings, as there are multiple. This is one of the main reasons why the game has fantastic replay value. An impressive 12 endings exist in total, consisting of 6 for Chris and 6 for Jill. For a game from 1996 to have this many endings that can be triggered based on a multitude of choices you make throughout the game is quite the feat in my opinion. Thanks to the game's short length that will most likely become even shorter in subsequent playthroughs, there is more of an incentive to replay the game to watch the other endings in addition to triggering alternative choices when you make different decisions during a replay. While Resident Evil is known as a survival horror title, action and adventure gameplay mechanics are also core features of the game. Much of the gameplay revolves around collecting items that allow you to progress. Many other interactable objects also exist. You can pick up weapons of varying effectiveness, from combat knives to grenade launchers, with their ammunition being dotted around the mansion. As I mentioned before, files and letters can be read, piecing together the reasons behind the state of things at the mansion. Other interactable objects can be moved. There's herbs that allow you to regain health or treat poisons, ink ribbons you have to use at typewriters to save your progress, storage boxes you can use to store items from your inventory and vice versa, and numerous prompts that ask you whether you want to turn on a switch, for example. What's worth bearing in mind is that survival is one of Resident Evil's gameplay mechanics, and so you only have a certain number of slots in your inventory to store items. Along the way, there will be several puzzles to complete too, and some of the files and letters you can read contain clues to help you solve them. Most of these puzzles are mandatory to access certain rooms. I will say that if you're wondering whether you'll need a guide or walkthrough to figure out how to solve the majority of the puzzles, you shouldn't, as they're all quite simple, except for one that may not seem quite as straightforward at first. As for the controls, they might take a bit of getting used to initially because the original Resident Evil utilises tank controls. However, I think it shouldn't take too long to become accustomed to them. To use your weapon, you must hold down a button that readies it before you can press the button to attack with it. You can only attack with your weapon if you aren't moving as well. Moreover, you can aim your weapon up or down at an enemy. If a zombie is close to you and you aim your pistol up at its head, there's a high chance you will perform a headshot, instantly killing it, rather than firing multiple shots at it and using more bullets. At times, avoiding enemies might be the best solution, if you're low on ammo, and so using their movement and attack patterns to your advantage can be beneficial when trying to run past them. Difficulty-wise, Jill's campaign is classed as easy while Chris's is classed as hard. When playing as Jill, you can more easily find more powerful weapons and open certain doors sooner with the lockpick, while you must find old keys to unlock these doors when playing as Chris. Jill has a larger inventory consisting of 8 slots in contrast to Chris's 6. There are certain situations where Jill can get help while Chris can't, making these situations significantly tougher during a playthrough as Chris, such as the boss fights. However, Chris can take more damage than Jill and is usually more effective against enemies. For example, he is much more likely to land a critical hit on an enemy. Admittedly, I died way more times in Chris's campaign than Jill's, and there was a certain section of Chris's campaign, which I made harder for myself, where I racked up many deaths. Jill's campaign had a bit of challenge here and there, but wasn't that difficult, while Chris's was much harder. Resident Evil's soundtrack had not 1, not 2, but 3 composers, the first being Makoto Tomozawa, whose other credits include the Mega Man Legends and Dino Crisis games, Koichi Hiroki, who at least based on my research has no credits for any other video games, and Masami Ueda, who would go on to compose for the original Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, its remake, the original Devil May Cry, and the original Bayonetta. Sorry if I mispronounced any of their names. The haunting music is a significant contributor to the game's atmosphere and amplifies the constant state of dread you feel when navigating navigating the mansion's many rooms and corridors. Additionally, the score evokes mystery, intensity, tranquility, and even sadness. Overall, the soundtrack is superb and is viewed as an iconic feature of the game in the Resident Evil community. Is the original Resident Evil worth playing in 2026? Absolutely. Don't let factors like its age and graphics put you off. To be honest, those two factors are part of its appeal. For a 30-year-old game, the gameplay holds up relatively well nowadays, and I personally like it. I'm not a horror fan, and I hadn't played a horror/survival horror game before this one and its remake. Yet, I really enjoyed the original Resident Evil. When playing for the first time, I'd play as Jill before Chris due to her campaign being easier and more forgiving. Resident Evil isn't simply an experience that shows you everything it has to offer after a single playthrough. If you enjoyed your first playthrough and want more, it doesn't have to end there, and I think the game is certainly worthy of at least a second run. In conclusion, Resident Evil is a survival horror classic, and frankly, a classic in general. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to give it a like if you did, and subscribe to see more content like this. Enjoy the rest of your day, and that is all.